Welcome back to Mac's Workshop episode 3. We've got the model nearly complete and I'll give you a guided tour of that in a minute. There's a new cowl waiting to go on the front, and as soon as that arrives I'll get that fitted. There are some really interesting decals that I've printed up and designed myself, and this model is going to look completely different to what it did when we started. It's going to have quite a sporty racing theme to it, which I'll go on to in a minute. So let's have a quick look down the front. The 4MAX motor is now mounted in the frames, which has been bolted to the front of the bulkhead. There was a lot of fiddling and filing and drilling to make that fit, but I'm reasonably happy now with the way that's gone in. The front cowl has still got the cutaway on it. I think that looks quite good actually, because it gives you like an inside view on what everything looks like underneath it. I've ordered another replacement cowl from another company, and that should be here imminently, and there's a few little decals and things to go on that, which will make it look really, really sporty indeed. Moving into where the fuel tank was, you can see the motor wires coming in from the back of the bulkhead going into the Turnigy Plush 40 amp speed controller with an XT60 connector on there. The speed controller wire then goes through the second bulkhead into the main radio bay. There's a Spectrum AR500 receiver in there. That's a DSMX2. I bought that via some classified adverts that I found rather than going through a store. And the main difference in there now, there is all the cables are being tie wrapped together. One thing I hate in the engine bay of a model is a lot of spaghetti. Don't like that at all, so that's all tied down to stop it moving around. There's a little servo extension lead on there where the aileron servo will plug into when we're ready to go flying. And I've mounted the receiver cable to the side of the model to stop everything moving around. Moving back a bit, I've gone over the model with a covering gun to smooth out some of the creases that are in there. There are a few little dents and dings in there. I'll do a bit on how to cover a model in a minute, but one of the key things you need to do before you start covering is to make sure everything's sanded flat and any dents and dings are removed and covered up, otherwise they'll show up in the film. Moving a bit more, there's a few dings and things in there, but that will be fine once we've got the decals on there. There are some really, really smart waterside decals going on there, which I'll cover in a minute, I'll be putting on shortly. Again, looking at the tail and the elevator, there's a few bits on there that I had to pull out with a covering iron to make them look nice, flat and smooth again, but that's all ready to go. And I've taken some of the side decals off as well, cut them back because there'll be some bigger decals going on the rear of the model. One of the questions that came out from episode 1 that somebody asked me was all about covering a model. I've explained just now that I'm going to recover the model and pull out some of the stretches on the iron-on film. But one of the questions that I was asked was, how exactly do you go about doing this? Covering a model with iron-on film is probably one of the most least pleasant tasks that you have to do. Over the years, I've probably ended up putting more film in the bin than I've actually used as a finished product on the model. I'm just going to go through that now and explain how I cover my models. The key thing about covering a model and getting the iron-on covering to work successfully is getting the temperature of the iron right. This is my covering iron. I've had this for years. As you can see, the handle of it's held together with epoxy. It's been around a while, but I've got used to it. I've got used to its temperature. I usually think that the sweet spot for getting the covering temperature right on this particular iron is around about there. And you know when the temperature is correct, because if you put the covering onto the iron, it will just start to pit nicely, and that's not too hot and that's not too cold. In fact, I'm going to turn it down a little bit, I think. Yeah, it did start to pit up fairly quickly, so I'm going to turn the temperature down. While that's cooling, this is the iron-on covering material. This is literally straight off the roll. This is a product called Solar Film. I don't believe that that's in existence anymore. I think the company that produced it stopped producing this a couple of years ago. Now, key thing to do, if you've got a specialist covering iron, that's so much the better. You can use the iron that you use to iron your clothes with. I used to do that many years ago when I was a young and skint student. First thing to do is make sure that you take the backing film off the covering. Very, very important. First time I used this product, I didn't realise that you had to take the backing film off. Went to do some iron-on covering with my mum's iron. The film promptly melted, stuck to the iron, and she was not best pleased. So that's material there, and here's a small piece of balsa wood that I use for covering the material with, that I'm going to cover now. Literally spread the material onto the piece of wood that you want to cover, and that's the piece of material, and there's an ever so slight overlap around all of the edges, roughly about a couple of millimetres either side. Spread the material out, grab your iron, and I then literally just tack on like the last centimetre of it, so I go like that. You can see now where the material's tacked on. That's stuck to the material nice and firm. If you get the end of the iron and just go over that ever so quickly. Smoothing out any air bubbles as you go. Get the sides done. The end's done. When you've got the sides over there, just get the very tip of the iron. Just go iron that on, tack it, tack it, tack it. And again, use the end of the iron to pull the material over and smooth it down nicely. Doing this when you're not having to talk to the camera is generally a lot easier as well, so smooth it down, get the thing on there, cover it. Smooth any air bubbles, finish off doing the sides. There it is. Small piece of balsa wood covered in solar film. I've probably made that look easy. It's only easy because I only made it look easy because I've been doing it for years. As I said at the start of the clip, I probably put more of this film in the bin over the years than I have actually put onto a finished model. Practice does make perfect. Just practice on a small piece of balsa wood, and it'll soon become second nature. Just going to go back indoors now and onto my computer, and I'll show you how I did the rather smart set of deep decals that I'm going to be using to covering the plane with. It's water slide paper that I print off on my inkjet printer, and I then seal with some special lacquer. Any lacquer like the clear lacquer that you can get in Halfords or anything like that. Just give it a quick spray over with that to seal it on. And I get the images off of the internet, which I then manipulate in Adobe Photoshop, and I then print that onto the decal paper. Let's go indoors and have a quick look at it. So I start by making the decals. I use a package called Adobe Photoshop, and I usually start off with a blank A4 size sheet of paper to start doing the drawing on. From there, from the internet, I download the various logos I want using PNG format and import them into Photoshop, preferably vector files as it makes them much more easier to manipulate. Here are the Babe Ruth logos that will be going on the front of the model. Move them into Photoshop and drag them up into the top left hand corner. I'm really careful to utilise as much of the paper as I can, as I don't like throwing it out, as the decal paper is quite expensive to buy. Drag the decals on and then manipulate them using the transform function, which is Ctrl and T, one of the really common Photoshop functions. Next file I'm going to import will be the Haas logos that goes on the side of the model. Again, they came out really small, so I've got to improve the size of them, increase the size of them, make them much larger, and drag them in and dump them in onto the Babe Ruth settings. And there's two of them. That's just a simple cut and paste. And as you can see, each different logo has a different layer on it. This makes it much more easy to manipulate. Next coming up is a wind shear file, or the wind shear logo. That's again is a vector. Cut and paste that in. Move everything around. Oops, didn't select the correct layer then, so I'm going back onto layer 5. Drag the wind shear down, Ctrl and T, and make it a little bit bigger so everything's uniform in size. This decal paper is really good. You print the thing off on a normal inkjet printer, spray it with some clear lacquer, which I showed you in the workshop, leave it for a couple of hours for the lacquer to set, and then you just dunk it in some warm water and pull it onto the model. Really good fun stuff to use. I just wish that this sort of material had been available many years ago. It would have made life a lot easier. Next we've got the Pirelli logo coming in. I'm going to move that in under the wind shear, make everything the same size. These will be going on the back of the model. Whoops, dragged it down the wrong way. Bring it in a bit more under the wind shear, and I'm going to scale it down a bit. Generally this is the clear backed decal paper. If I was putting this onto any other colour than white, it would look quite dull, so you can get the white backed paper, which is much easier to use, but then you have to cut round it. Here comes the Jack and Jones logo. Just going to move that in now, manipulate it around, and there we go. Ctrl T, and just align it a bit more. That's it. Great.
Control T again to get the size right and move everything around it, get everything aligned. And that's it really. Let's go back to the studio.
Hopefully you found that useful. Here are the printed decals, all ready to go onto the model. Some of them I've cut, I've already lacquered them, I just need to get the water slide material to go on there. I took the window compartments off and stuck them to the backing panel of this carbon fibre film. You can get this on eBay. I think this roll was about £5, I think. It's very, very cheap. I cut the windows and the windshield out, put it back onto the model, and it'll give it a much more futuristic, racy sort of look, which is what I'm going for. That's about it for episode 3. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you've got any questions, please do ask away, comment or anything like that, and I'll see you on episode 4 when we'll conclude the build and get everything back together again. See you soon. Ta-da for now. Bye-bye.